Hey, it's Corey Buljoff, the Real Estate Guy, doing another monthly market update, keeping you informed with real stats and facts so you can decipher what's really going on in the real estate market. Today, we're going to cover three major topics. We're going to cover how the mortgage rates are affecting the real estate market. Number two, we're going to look at, are we coming into a housing correction? Is this a housing bubble? What's really going to happen? And then kind of the number three is what lies ahead. So we can kind of look at the key indicators, keeping you guys informed. So with no further ado, let's get into it. As always, guys, if you like what's being said or you think one of your friends, family members, coworkers would benefit by this, please like this down below. Please share it, comment on it. And as always, feel free to reach out, ask me any kind of questions you can. No obligation, no pressure, just here to help. All right, so the first thing we're going to talk about, it's all about the mortgage rates. Realistically, for the last 2 years, rates have really been a big deciding factor of what's going on in the market. So we had the all-time low interest rates. We had a 30-year fix under 3%, never happened in the history of our country. So it really did affect the real estate market. Also, what actually, defined as a home, what was important as a home, where people wanted to live, that really also brought a huge buyer demand into the market that we've never seen before. Usually people buy in school districts or where they're closer to work. And as we were allowed to work at home, teach at home, and different dynamics of the household changed, that became a whole different, ballpark and what people were actually looking at. So how mortgage rates have affected the real estate market. First, we're going to look at mortgage rates stay relatively flat. This was June 2nd, 2022. Sam Khater, the chief economist of Freddie Mac. Mortgage rates continue to inch downward this week, but are still significantly higher than last year, affecting affordability and purchase demand. Heading into summer, the potential home buyer pool has shrunk, supply is on the rise, and the housing market is normalizing. This is welcome news following an unprecedented market tightness over the last couple of years. And market tightness meaning that there wasn't a lot of inventory. Now, this was just back in June 2nd, and the rates were hovering right above at high fours, low fives. Right now, they just took a huge jump up. They're right above 6%, even 6.25%, depending on what 30-year fix. So now we're going to start seeing maybe people start electing to do that 5, 10-year or 15-year ARM, which hasn't been even a necessity or a want of most home buyers. When we look at mortgage rates and we go back to 12/30 of 2021, we are right above 3%, 3.11% nationwide on a 30-year fix. We've seen that exponentially climb an unprecedented rate all the way up to 5. We've been hovering in the low 5s for this last month and a half, and then we just had another rate increase due to the Fed's raising the rate, trying to combat inflation. Every 1% the interest rates go up, your purchasing power goes down by 10 to 15%. So rates really do affect your monthly payment, as well as how much you can actually get qualified and how much you can get approved for. So raising rates usually do start constricting the market, just because it'll limit how many buyers can actually afford the home prices. When we look at the current mortgage rate compared to the last 5 decades, it actually shows you a whole different picture, especially if you just get into the real estate market, maybe you've only purchased your first home or haven't sold a home in a couple of years. This really shows you. So in the 1970s, the average was 8.86. In the 1980s, it went up to 12.7. They've actually had interest rates as high as 18% in different years. Then in the 90s, it went down to 8.12. And a 40-year average, we average about 7.8 to 8.25 nationwide, depending on a 30-year fix. So anything under 6% is a great rate. Anything between 6 and 8 is a pretty normal rate. So we're coming back to normalcy. I know it doesn't feel like it because the last decade and a half, we've had extremely low interest rates, usually below 6%, and went all the way down to like 4%, 3%, but it's going back to normalcy. So just keep that in mind when you're actually deciding to purchase a home. It's not that rates are astronomical, unaffordable. They're just going back to normal. Rising rates impact on affordability. So again, I just kind of want to show you how the rates really do affect your monthly payment, which ultimately affects the amount of price you're able to afford. So if you want a $4,000 monthly mortgage desired payment at 3%, which is in the beginning of this year, or the end of last year, you could buy $1,054,000 house. Today, it's over, let's say if it is even just 5.5%, your mortgage payment at $4,000 could buy you a $782,000 house. So again, you'll have to put maybe $30,000 less, but your payment is a lot more, making you only afford, that's under 22%. So your buying power has decreased by 22% from December to today. So the longer you wait, the more that your buying power is going to keep going down. Now, this is, people always go, I want the perfect advice versus the expert advice. So what I try to do is give you guys enough information so that you guys can know, and coming from a bunch of different experts. So that way, we're not just getting one person's opinion, my opinion, we kind of combine them all together, and that way you guys can make the best decision for yourself. No one has the crystal ball. I don't believe there ever is such thing as perfect advice, because no one actually knows for 100% sure what's going to happen. We can look at key indicators and be on top of the market. So I actually do a market update every single week, and then I do one of these monthly market updates once a month. So that way I can keep you guys in touch with what's really going on in the market and help you guys be there. So for almost 50 years, the 30-year mortgage rate has moved in unison with the 10-year treasury yield. So that's why when the feds have raised the 10-year bond, that's why it does affect the mortgage rates, because they pretty much have always gone hand in hand. Now, obviously, they're not as low as the 10-year bond, because that's how banks make their money. But as you can see, we've kind of been on this trend, at least for the last couple of decades, of it going down. We're going to start seeing it itch back up, and that's a lot to do with combating inflation. I've said this before, it's what happens when you pump in $7 trillion. It makes our dollar worth a lot less. And then you compile that with supply chain issues, prices going up on gas, different things that now our products are going up, but our dollar isn't buying as much more than it just being a supply chain issue. The 30-year mortgage rate versus the 10-year, there's usually on average about a 2.2% spread on that. That's pretty average, and it's pretty much hand in hand with what's going on right now. So you can see nothing to be, super alarmed about. It's pretty natural. It happens. At this point in time, maybe getting a 5-year or 10-year ARM might be, so where it's fixed for 5 years or it's fixed for the first 10 years. Maybe that gives time for the rates to go up and then trend back down, as they usually go up and then they go down. Just kind of the same with real estate prices. They always have a trend of going up, but in between the up, it goes up and down, without really noting a huge crash. So it comes to our next thing. Are we in a housing market correction? Are we in this housing bubble? I know we're seeing it all over the news, social media. You talk to your real estate expert, family member that knows everything about real estate, and all they're talking about and has been calling for the last 2 years, right when COVID started, oh, the market's going to crash. I even know one of my big investors who buys 50 homes, we bet a dinner that the market was going to crash. I did not believe it could crash. He thought it was going to crash. 2.5 years later, we've seen over a 30% appreciation rate over the 2 years. So it definitely didn't crash. Are we going to come to a correction? I don't know. What's defined as a correction is a decline of a 10% or greater in the price of a security asset or financial market. So over the home price forecasts, over the 7 major banks, is that we're going to see, basically an 8.9% average appreciation this year. The Mortgage Professional Association or Broker Association calls for about a 5.8, and Fannie Mae went all the way up as high as a 10.8% appreciation. Now, some of that is going to be adjusted by the rates keeping going up, but by no means do any of them calling for a crash or a 10%. So, and appreciation is based on what a house sold for last June and what a house sells for this June. So we might see houses that sold back in January, February, April get a higher price than they did in June, July, and August. But last year, June, July, and August, a house is not going to sell for less than in this year, June, July, and August, based on what we're seeing. Danielle Hale, the chief economist of Realtor.com, the housing market is at a turning point. We're starting to see signs of a new direction, but the ball is still in the seller's court in most housing markets across the country. So usually what we see is California is one of the fastest ones to see the appreciation, and then they'll start showing signs of it as the other country around the country start showing signs as well. But we're usually the first indicator of what's going on. Usually also at the same time, it's that high price point. So anything above $1.35 million, they're the ones also to see the first hits of showing a sign. So we are coming into a shift. We're not going to go up by 22% appreciation rate like we did last year. We were at about a 300 mile per hour market, and we're going to come back down into like something of normal, like maybe 60 to 80 mile per hour market. I can't see it going less than 3.5 to 5% appreciation, which is the 40-year average. So we're probably going to go somewhere in that, in my opinion, maybe a little higher if buyer demand still stays up point and if they get a hold of inflation and they get a hold of interest. So according to Showing Time's monthly index, when we look at the last couple of years of showings, we're basically headed back to pre-pandemic demand. So obviously come 2020, the demand was starting to rise. Then we had the fall off happen right at the beginning of the pandemic when we were shut down and actually not even legally allowed to show homes. And then we had a huge spike up, and then it stayed pretty high into the months of 2021. The thing that was interesting is usually generally we have July, June, August as the high showing times, but something started right before the pandemic where actually they started having more showings February, March, April, and even into December and January. So that kind of went up. So obviously in 2020, 2021, even now at the beginning of 2022, the showing has been really, really high. We are starting to see it to level off. And definitely over this last month and a half, it's really starting to come back down to that pre-pandemic demand. So again, it's not that the market is crashing. We're just going back to a normal market. You're going to see houses on the market for 30, 60, maybe even 90 days before they get the offer that suits their needs. We're going to start seeing houses expire. So realistically, who your agent is really matters right now, both on the selling side and the buying side, because you really have to be able to navigate through this transitionary period of end market. When we look at existing home sales, so again, we look at the pre-pandemic sales were about 5.5 million, 5.3 million, 5.3 million. Then we did have a little bit of a jump up in 2020. There was a little bit of a slowdown again when the market was shut down, but it did jump up to 5.6. 2021, we had a 6.1 million existing home sales. And right now we're going to be averaging about 5.6 million. So we're again heading back to that pre-pandemic sales of existing homes. And these again are in the millions. When we look at average days on the market, normal market, again, if it turns into a buyer's market once we sit on the market for 4 to 6 months. Anything less than 30 days is a really hot seller's market. So we've been averaging about 17 days on the market in this last 3 months, but we were down to like 7 days. So again, we're going back to a normal market. It's still very, very hot. It's still a great market for sellers. There is an upside to the buyers. There's now more listings. There's more competition. There's more opportunities to get the home that you want rather than just a home. When we look at the average number of offers, we were at the high 20, 30 different offers. I think the one of the most I had was 44 different offers on one piece of property. I did just sell one in April. We had 22 offers on the property. Now my listings in May and June are starting to get more like that 2 to 5 range. So on average right now, it's about 5.5 national average. There are still other states across the country that are experiencing a lot more offers. And that just is really kind of the price point, moving out of California in a high price point, out of New York in a high price point, and they're moving to those more suburb areas and those less populated areas that you can still find houses for reasonably good price. So when we come down to it, what's ahead, okay? Mortgage rates are likely to plateau near current levels. The financial markets have attempted to price in the impact of Fed's actions over this cycle, and they are likely also pricing in the economic slowdown that will result. Once we are past this spike rate and associated volatility, the Mortgage Brokers Association expects that potential home buyers may be more willing to re-enter the market. So whenever the rates jump up for that first 2 to 3 weeks, we see a little bit of slowdown. A lot of it's because if you were approved for, let's say, 100,000 at 4.85%, the rates jumped up to 6.25. You're now approved probably for like 680, maybe 700,000. So your buying power went down, and those people are usually the ones that leave the market altogether because they're not going to be able to find their ideal house that was at 800,000, and the price is definitely not coming down to 680,000. So unless they get more influx of cash, they add another buyer onto the transaction, they're going to be basically putting themselves out of the market. At that rate, I always kind of tell my buyers, maybe buying your own home that you're supposed to move into isn't ideal, but maybe buying a rental where now you can have someone else pay that mortgage, and at least you're growing appreciation and some equity into your home. When we look at the total home sale forecast, so this is again in the millions, we see a 6.1 to a high of 6.9 million homes. So they still think it's going to be a really hot market, and it's going to continue through this year. And again, I have said for a couple months now, I really do think that if this might be the last year that the average American can afford to buy a home. I see the home price is going to still appreciate by 3 to 5% at most, maybe at minimum, depending on what housing economist you decide to listen to. But rates are going to keep going up. So affordability is going to really get pushed out. And that's why a huge percentage of buyers right now are investors. They're buying it all cash, and then they're just renting it out, getting more than their 3% return on the monthly thing. Or investors are buying it and renting it out, holding a note, and that's still plus positive. Experts don't believe in the market is in a bubble or a crash is in the cards, likely like during the Great Recession. The nation is still suffering from a housing shortage that has reached crisis proportions at a time when many millennials are reaching the age when they start to consider home ownership. That's likely to keep prices high. Also, what I'll say is there's a huge transition that's about to happen in the senior citizens. A lot of senior citizens own their homes outright. They own these big homes. They're also now going to be selling those big homes and moving into those single story, smaller units. So there's going to be a transition and a fight for that first time home buyer home, as well as there's going to be more opportunity for the families that are going to move up. So this year might be the year that, or the next year even, might be the year that we do the move up and move down buyers, and that will be a lot of the transition that happens. According to the National Bureau of Economic Research, defines a recession as a significant decline in the economic activity spread across the economy, lasting more than a few months, normally visible in real GDP, real income, employment, industrial production, and wholesale retail sales. So that's when we're coming to recession. Unfortunately, most people today think of recession, housing crash. And it's just not true. Recessions do not equal housing crashes. You've seen my monthly market reports, you've seen this one before, but home price changed during the last 6 recessions. So we've had 6 different recessions, according to the definition of such, since 1980 to today. 1980, we had a 6.1% appreciation during that recession. 1981, the year I was born, 3.5% appreciation. 1991, we had a minimal decrease of 1.9%. Had a lot to do with wages, kind of where the economy was at, and also the transition of the homes jumping from like 200 to 400,000. So that came down a little bit in price. 2001, we had a 6.6% appreciation growth. 2008, yes, that was not a recession. That was actually a housing bubble, a housing crash. A lot of that was caused by buyers that were not qualified to get loans were getting loans. There was no restriction on loan programs, and they were actually making really bad programs. And a lot of people were in these adjustable rate mortgages. So, and not just a 5-year or 10-year. A lot of people had 6-month or pay option ARM, where they're paying below interest rate and trying to add it on to there. Also, a lot of people are using their house as a credit card. I do believe in taking on equity out of your home, but not if you're going to go buy watches and jewelries and go travel on trips with it. No, if you're going to invest that money, then I think it's a great opportunity to invest in more real estate, or if you're into stocks, invest in some stocks, especially right now when the market's low. But that was a housing crash. We are nowhere near where we were at. And I've gone over that. And if you want to go over it in your neighborhood, I can explain to you in real sense, real stats, real key indicators, why we are nowhere near the 2007-2008 crash. And then in 2020, they're calling for a 6% appreciation when that kind of slowed down and during that recession due to the pandemic. So I just want you guys to know that recessions do not equal housing crashes. If you're looking to buy a home, I would still recommend you do so even at the higher interest rates, because we have no reason to believe that home prices will stop appreciating. Home values going up is only a problem when you're trying to buy. When you own, it's a gift. And that was by Shiviani Peterson, the mortgage expert. So again, guys, where the market is headed, it's the housing insanity is coming to an end. We are seeing a shift in the market, but we're talking about not just we were up at 220 miles an hour. Now we're going back to that 40, 60, maybe 100 miles an hour, depending on what market you're in. Also, I want you guys to look at is the rates. The rates are about, 5.45. They're headed back to where they were 2010. I know we're headed right back up to, above 6, but we're back to a normal interest rate market. So we've been kind of, spoiled a little bit and having these great interest rates, but it's still a great time to buy. Again, if you calculate what you're growing in equity by paying down your principal, what your housing, is going to appreciate by at least 3.5 to 5%, maybe even up to 10% this year, you're going to be beating that interest rate. And above all, if you pay $3,200 in rent, that $3,200 is going to pay the landlord's mortgage, or in your opinion, it's going to the trash, because it might as well, it's not going to anywhere to benefit you other than you have a place to live. When you take that same $3,200 or maybe even $3,600, you are now gaining equity. You have a chance to gain appreciation. So you're in a much better situation by owning, really, no matter what the rate is, as long as you can afford it. And I, kind of go this, they always say in real estate, the best year to buy real estate was last year. And it was always last year, because there really is no year that's a bad year to invest in real estate. Maybe you can question that by saying 2006, 2005, but if you didn't have to sell in 2007, 2008, you've since recovered and your house is worth more than what you bought it for. And ultimately, you accumulated equity by paying your mortgage and paying down your principal. So there really is no bad time to invest in real estate. It's not as volatile as stocks and bonds and different, more risky investments. It's kind of a way that you can hedge your retirement is through real estate. As always, I hope you guys do find these useful. I know sometimes I babble a little bit, but I want to give you as much information as you possibly can. That way you can keep informed, stay on top of the real estate market. It is one of our biggest investments we have in our lives. And as always, if you ever know of anyone looking to buy, sell, or invest in real estate, please think of me. I promise to deliver 5-star service. I also do give a referral gift to you, and also a seller credit or a buyer credit to the person that you're referring to. I cover from San Diego to Santa Barbara. I'm also licensed in 8 different states through people on my team. So we can help you no matter where you're looking to buy, where you're looking to sell, or where you're looking to invest. Here to help, Corey Bulldruff, the real estate guy. Talk to you guys soon.